Hello, Furidashi listeners, and welcome to, as it turns out, the final episode of Season 5. Yes, that is correct. We have nearly finished 5 years of this podcast. We are so much older. We are so much wiser, question mark,
I
than we
feel
were
wiser.
before. And I'm so glad that you guys many of you have stuck with us from the very beginning. Some of you have decided to come on just this year. Some of you, arrived somewhere in the middle. We appreciate all of you. We love all of you, and we're glad you're here. And we're glad to be ending this particular season with Miyazaki Hayato's Kiki's Delivery Service. But before we get into that, I wanted to talk a little bit about what we're going to be up to for the coming year, because we have already decided on a theme for season 6. Oh my God, 6 seasons. It's a lot. Which I have tentatively titled The Year of Metal Gear, not just because of the assonance in year and gear, but also because over the years, Lauren and I, in our private conversations, and sometimes publicly on this very podcast, have talked a lot about Kojima Hideo, the very famous video game director, and at least my mixed feelings, maybe Lauren's slightly less mixed feelings about Kojima. And we thought that it would actually be kind of appropriate to look at his career up to date, precisely because of the fact that, to my mind, his is one that's really interesting because it goes from fairly early on in the history of mainstream video games right up to the present moment. And along the way, he was always relevant. In other words, it's not like his sort of like star rose at one particular moment, fell, came up again, or like he was really prominent in the 90s, but since then has just made trash.
Yeah.
Several people come to mind when I say that, but he is someone who has always been relevant and always been very much a sort of a thinker about what you can and cannot do with video games as a storytelling medium. So with that in mind, we are going to go through every mainline Metal Gear game, beginning with the original Metal Gear for the MSX and ending with his most recent Metal Gear game, Death Stranding 2. And if you want to know why that is a coherent argument and that is a coherent timeline, well, you're actually just going to have to listen throughout the entire year. And we'll be discussing all of those games on our free episodes. Although I will note that the first episode, so season 6, episode 1, is almost certainly going to be about sort of like Kojima generally and where he comes from. We might talk a little bit about his very bizarre memoir, The Creative Gene. And just generally speaking, like what his early influences were and how that kind of factored into the sort of video game director that he became. But that is coming in the next year. So look forward to that. And I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew about it and was getting hyped for, I don't know, really, really, really tight pants on Solid Snake, which is the thing we're going to have to talk about.
I'm excited for tight pants. We're going to talk about tight pants so often. If you don't own a pair of tight pants out there and you're a male, 'cause I'm sure women wear leggings all the time now. So I've got plenty of tight pants. Thank you. You're welcome. But you need some tight pants.
Yeah, and
They
as you
do
can hear,
exist.
I'm here with Lauren. Lauren is also here too. I'm not just like pontificating.
No, I wanted the pontification because I'm super excited for the year of Metal Gear, just like I am super excited for today's episode, which is about Kiki's Delivery Service, which is probably one of my favorite Ghibli films of all time, if not my actual favorite Ghibli film. Like
Yeah.
we were thinking about this and we were discussing it on what kind of really good note to end on for really strong like anime and or animated film or however you want to do this in the West, however you want to label Kiki's Delivery Service.
Yeah.
And I really loved choosing this one because for me, I think that it's the one that while I watched Spirited Away first, like Kiki just stuck with me as like, ah, yes, I saw so many universal kind of parallels in her own coming of age story, at
Yeah.
least like on the surface. Even if I didn't say like resonate with them like one to one, I was just like, yes, I have been through this as a young girl, like going to like college or going to like a different town. Like I very vividly remember having those memories. Oh yeah, I'm not wearing a dress like everybody else. I don't have the same clothes, like things like that.
Yeah.
I'm bringing up these surface level issues because we're going to talk about a lot of deeper stuff, not
Yeah.
just like, you
Yeah.
know, um, and since we'll go into that, but it also is really interesting as well comparatively to other early Ghibli films. And for
Yeah.
me, for those of you who don't know, because I didn't know this when I first watched Kiki's Delivery Service, and then was once educated, and then I read the book of
Yeah.
Kiki's Delivery Service, and it was actually based on a novel. So
Yeah.
I think that was really interesting because now we'll actually be able to kind of compare and contrast not just right Kiki's Delivery Service in the milieu of right media and young girl coming of age stories, but we'll be able to compare it actually with two creators' viewpoints, right, of
Yeah.
who they wanted to
Yeah.
kind of show who Kiki was. And obviously, a book is a lot like longer, right, a reader to read versus like watching right an hour and a
Yeah.
half
It's
film.
not a super long book. I can show it to you real quick.
But it's still a book, and people,
Yeah.
you know what I mean.
So, oh no, I grabbed the wrong one.
You did. I was here for you. I was like, no one else knows
All right,
that.
there it is.
Now
I
they
really,
do.
I
Hello,
really, I really,
everyone.
I really like the original art on
Yeah, the
the first
original art is
edition.
super cute. Yeah. I like how we didn't have to even like record that to be honest. Everyone's like, "Oh, I grabbed the wrong one." Like no one can see.
Yeah, the notoriously visual medium that is podcasting. I know you all saw the cover and you were like, "Wow, that's really." I really love
Wow.
the artwork too.
Yeah, instead of like Kiki, like imagine everyone probably when you think of Kiki from Kiki's Delivery Service, like you have that visualization. Imagine somebody that's a little bit more like witchy from like a cartoon on like a costume, right? The longer black hair, like the frayed, like kind of edges of the drawing, like more of an American kind of costume witch. And then she's got like the little Red Riding Hood like satchel, right? Instead of like her little backpack and stuff. It's very cute. Like it's actually much more witchy, right? Than I would say Miyazaki's Kiki,
Oh
right,
yeah,
is more of a young
definitely.
girl.
Yeah, the artwork that accompanies the original novel, which is the first volume in a very very long series, is definitely more in line with a kind of like it's more Halloweeny, I guess is the way I would describe it. Like
Yeah.
it definitely has a much more not necessarily a spooky vibe. It has like a cute Halloween vibe. Like little kids in like, goofy costumes, little boys and girls in witch hats, like stuff like that. Like that's kind of what it looks like. Whereas the film is very much like in Ghibli's house style. Like
Yeah.
it looks like every other Ghibli film.
Yeah. So before we get into that, Nicholas, let's like talk more about early Ghibli because I think
Yeah.
like it'll be really interesting for us to we will come back to the nature, right, of Halloweeny witchy, something that
Yeah.
when you think of a Western kind of witch versus, right, Kiki as like a young girl witch.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's talk about some early Ghibli stuff.
So I should note that when I say early Ghibli, I'm mostly talking. And by the way, I'm going to say Ghibli throughout. The pronunciation of the
Oh
title of the
yeah.
studio I know is a big thing, but in Japanese they do say Ghibli, even though that's not actually how the Italian word is pronounced.
Yeah, it is Ghibli. We will be using
Very annoying.
Ghibli. We are a strong Ghibli. If you are an Italian or a Spaniard or a Ghibli
Ghibli.
person,
Are
it
you a
is
Ghibli?
it is a Ghibli. It is
Yeah.
Ghibli. That is
Yeah.
the correct way to technically pronounce the word. I guess if you asked Google AI. However, culturally it is Ghibli, and so we will be
Yeah.
using that today.
Djibouti in Japanese.
Djibouti,
Anyway, so
because
yeah, so early Ghibli is basically everything before 1997, which was the premiere of Mononoke Hime, sorry, Princess Mononoke, which was the first Ghibli film to be released roughly contemporarily in North America, and also was sort of the beginning of the not production, distribution partnership with Disney, which later soured for various reasons. But sort of like that was the partnership with Disney was really kind of the advent of like Ghibli as a huge international icon as opposed to a Japanese icon. Um, and so, but in this early period, a little bit about the history of the studio. So the people who founded Ghibli were originally like a variety of producers, animators, and directors who worked for Toei, which is a huge production studio that doesn't just make animated films; they make all kinds of films, and even in some cases, television shows and various other forms of media. Like it's a huge production company. They left in the early '70s to create a studio called Topcraft, which didn't last very long. Released, I think, a handful of films, including Miyazaki's first non-Toei feature film, which is Kaze no Tani no Nausicaa, or Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, which is technically not a Ghibli film, although it is distributed by Ghibli nowadays. If you buy the DVD, it's got the Ghibli logo at the beginning. And then when Topcraft kind of fell apart, its assets and many of its personnel were then later like absorbed into Ghibli proper. And the reason why I bring this up is because there will be a lot of things that we talk about subsequently that very much reflect a kind of old school, like 60s and 70s studio animation culture in Japan, even in the Ghibli of today. But the reason why I wanted to sort of separate out early Ghibli, and I mean the whole studio, so not just Miyazaki, as a kind of like thing to look at is because the films that they produced in in the 80s, especially in the 80s, presented a very peculiar dichotomy for the viewer, because these were all films that were quite explicit, with one possible exception, were very explicitly marketed towards kids, or more broadly speaking to families. The idea, you're supposed to bring your kids to these films. At the same time, the films involve a lot of mature themes, especially given sort of like the subjective experiences of the protagonists. Probably the extreme example of this being Grave of the Fireflies, where you have one very young child and a younger boy, who together essentially have to deal with the deprivations as a result of like Japan during the Second World War. And spoilers, it doesn't go well. It's a harrowing film to
Yeah.
watch. Like,
If you have
but
never seen Grave of the Fireflies, I actually highly recommend. I was gonna say if this is a YouTube video, pause the video and then come back. But I highly recommend listening to our podcast and afterwards going and checking out Grave of the Fireflies. Or if you happen to be listening to us while you're on your computer, type in Grave of the Fireflies real quick into search, see where you can save it. I think it might be actually available on HBO Max. That's where I watched Kiki's Delivery Service.
maybe, I don't know yet.
Yeah, well, I know some of the Studio Ghibli films are on HBO Max.
Oh,
I
okay.
highly, highly recommend watching Grave of the Fireflies, specifically so you can understand what we mean by this dichotomy. Is that if you are a kid watching this film, you're not quite sure what's going on, but you do see a journey of like, kids your age, and they're set through a lot of like obstacles and trials, and there are some really beautiful moments with fireflies.
Yeah.
And then it ultimately doesn't go well. And if you were a kid watching this, you'd probably be like, what happened, mom and dad, at the end of this film? Versus your parents would be like, we're all going to go get ice cream
Yeah.
now.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah,
Like, let's
it
not
fucked
talk
me up as
about.
it fucked me up as a 20 something, not to say as a
Yeah.
kid.
No, exactly. Exactly. It was pretty. It was insane for me to watch it, having watched like Spirited Away or the other Ghibli films that end on even a lighter note, even if there's tragedy involved,
Yeah.
right? Or loss or separation. Grave of the Fireflies is incredibly intense. So I just want to like really highlight that, because Totoro is something we've all maybe been familiar with, at least in its like marketing, right? And its
Yeah.
iconography, if you haven't seen it. And it's very obvious that Totoro is for it's for kids. And now, as I'm getting a beautiful mug, Nicholas is actually using a Totoro mug today.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think that like the mother's illness in Totoro is a hard theme. But if you're a
Yeah.
kid watching Totoro, you're like, oh, I've seen my mom get sick and she gets better,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
right? So you're still that positive kind of escape. Grave of the Fireflies, it's not a positive escape. I'll put it that
No.
way.
No, it's not an
So
escape really at all.
it really isn't. So when we look at early Ghibli, that type of harrowing kind of ideas are just so pervasive in the work that it really kind of opened the door for like movies that, yeah, you should go see your families with. This is a cute, fun adventure, but it's not just a slapstick comedy, like distract your kids for an hour and a half. Like,
Yeah.
it really would even make your kids think. It would make them question, like, what are they watching?
And this is kind of a commonplace in like animated features now, but I just want everyone to bear in mind that like there was a time when that was not the case. Like it seems, if you think of films like, Inside Out and Inside Out 2, or like, the Frozen films where like the experiences of the protagonist are far more complicated than like a simple hero's journey type story, or like a simple Bildungsroman. um, that that actually comes from an influence explicitly created by these early Ghibli films. Like those animators, 100% are looking back at those early Ghibli films as a kind of like way of understanding how to present difficult material in a venue that was, as Lauren noted, much more noted for like slapstick and comedy, and generally stories that were kind of upbeat and uplifting. Whereas here, you can have a story that culminates in a kind of uplifting ending, but at the same time doesn't necessarily resolve its darker themes. Like it doesn't say like, "Oh yeah, there was the bad thing that happened, but now everything's better." It's like there's the bad thing that happened, things got a little better, but we're still dealing with it. And that's kind of that is a current that runs throughout all of the Ghibli works. Like I said, not just Miyazaki's.
Right, and just to be super clear as well, because this always comes up with Ghibli's about the Disney's animated feature films from anywhere from the 1930s to the 19 right 70s, and I say that because in the 1980s Disney was experimenting less with kind of traditional like the Snow White, the Cinderella type of animation style, or I think cell shading. I'm not an artist, and I am leveraging all the things that I have done when I went to the Ghibli film or I went to the Disney animation studio like years ago. Um, and a lot of those, right, even if they had like say darker kind of like themes, like you can say that like Bambi, right, is dark in some ways, but ultimately, right, had a happier ending. I mean, same with like Lady and the Tramp was 1955, Bambi is 1942, right?
Yeah.
I tried to find something from the 80s and I think I
Well,
found
so
like
like Fox and the
Oliver
Hound.
and Company, Fox and the Hound,
Fox and the Hound
right?
is 81, I think. Yeah, Oliver and
Yeah,
Company. Or a mixed animated film like Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
which is
Which is a
definitely
great
in an
film.
adult film. That is not
Yeah.
a kids film.
Yeah, but at the same time, even though it being a film for adults,
It
or
was
like
very
being a
slapstick. Yeah.
yeah, it still has that very like everything works out in the end. Like, yeah, it's kinda crazy
Exactly.
and weird
Every
and scary, but it
I
works
Who
out.
Framed Roger Rabbit is like my favorite movie.
I love
Jessica
that movie
Rabbit
too.
was
Yeah,
an
it's really good.
icon, and when I was 8, I was like, she's my idol. Like she was my first role
Oh, Little
model,
Mermaid. Little
everyone.
Mermaid was also late '80s, if I remember
Oh, Little
correctly.
Mermaid was late 80s. Okay, I was
Yeah,
trying to figure things out, or I was trying to like search it. But
yeah.
but point being is that even in these kind of films that do have, you could say, some adult themes, markedly in the West, we always try to, especially with kids, like literature or kids movies, always
Mhm.
end without tragedy, or like tragedy happens, but then we move on. Like there's always
Yeah.
an uplifting. So like markedly, even with films now today, like Frozen or Inside Out, there still is that level of, I don't know, from the West, at least like things get better. And so I do think it's really interesting to kind of highlight here the early Ghibli. And even like in some of Ghibli's films now, there is that end of what really happens now, like what really happens next, like question
Well,
mark.
actually, the Miles Morales films would also be a good example. Like the Spider-Verse films would be a good example of where, like, you know, they culminate, but they still don't necessarily resolve a lot of like the problems that they introduce. Which is, to their credit. I think they're very good films. But definitely that's a later development, I think, in Western animation. So let's talk about the film proper, Lauren. Um, One of the things that, so as we're both staring at the show notes, one of the things that I wanted to focus on was this notion of like Kiki's coming of age, because the plot of the film is like explicitly set up as she's leaving home, she's striking out on her own, she has to like try and figure out what her independent life is going to look like away from her parents. And then this is framed both in the novel and in the film as like this is just a thing witches do. Witches turn 13 and they're expected to go off into the world and resettle somewhere else and become the witch that lives there and does witchy things in that location as opposed to where they grew up.
Which is
Yes.
like both simultaneously just a universal theme. I think I don't know if I said this at the beginning of this episode or this was right before, but basically I really believe that Miyazaki kind of took a lot of the themes of the book and made them more universal. And I do think
Yeah,
young person leaving their home is like is just a very universal thing. But
yeah.
man, especially as having been a 13-year-old daughter of like with a dad and a mom, like man, my dad would not have let me like just get packed and called his
No.
mom and been like, "Hey, Lauren's going to leave today." He would have been like, "I am strapping you to a chair and we're going on this camping trip you promised me."
Yeah, so I rewatched the film last night with my daughter and who's 15, and I looked at her periodically throughout the film, and I'm like, "Why haven't you moved out yet? Why don't you get a job? You're still living with us. You're still mooching off us.
Oh
Come
my
on, chop chop."
No, my
Yeah.
dad still to this day, because there was something that he said, and I was watching it in English. I'm not sure if you were, but there's something he says in English where he's just like, "Hey, if it doesn't work out, you can always come home." Like I swear to good
He
night,
said no,
every
he says that
time.
that's in the Japanese as well,
Yeah,
yeah.
he says it like verbatim, and I swear every time I end a phone call with my dad, he's just like, "By the way, if things don't work out," I'm like, I have been out of the house for a
I'm a grown
decade.
ass woman.
Like, what's not gonna like, I appreciate it. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
really
yeah.
glad I love you, but that is a dad thing to say. I feel like,
Yeah.
"Hey, like, just letting you know."
I
Like,
think that's a some dad's thing to say. My dad never would have said anything like
yeah.
that.
Well, my
Yeah.
dad definitely would have said it. So, yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off halfway through it. I just
Oh,
wanted to really
no. I
point
mean,
out that, like,
actually,
it's
that brings up an interesting point, which is that and I don't wanna do too much of this, which is talking about, like, the differences between the film and the book, is that, like, in the book, it's very explicitly framed as, like, "No, once you're gone, you're gone." And this whole process, this, like, year that she spends away is about getting her to learn to acclimate from about being away from home and staying away from home. Whereas in the film, there's a little bit more of a tension between like you're going away, but there's always that sort of like connection that you can fall back on. Or like at the end of the film where she writes a letter to her parents. She's like, everything's going great. And they're like, and so it sets up this expectation that like she's living away, but she's going to be in constant communication with them. Like the connection remains despite that. Whereas the novel, or at least the end of the first volume, she actually Kiki goes back to visit her parents, and she originally plans on staying there for like 2 weeks. Sorry, 10 days, because it's got to be exactly 10 days for some reason. But then literally leaves the next day. Like she gets back home and she's like, "Oh yeah, I guess this just isn't for me anymore." And then she leaves with Gigi the next day. So she was barely there at all. And the way the novel ends is like, no, actually, Koriko, the town that in the novel that she goes to live in, she's like, no, that's my home now. That's who I am. I have become the person who lives there. I am no longer this childish version of myself. Like that's very explicit in the novel. Whereas in the film, I think it kind of wants to have it both ways. It wants to have that tension between Kiki as an independent person, which is very much in the film. Like that's it's not that it's absent, it's that it's sort of like in dialogue with this thing that Kiki sees herself as coming from a place, but also being part of another place and kind of always being in between the two of them.
yeah, something that I really liked about the movie, the film, and we have to remember too, Nicholas, that, like, when we're looking at Kiki's as a film, like, you only have, like, an hour and a half of, a person's time and attention to
Yeah.
cover what could be, like, 9 hours of a novel. It's not 9 hours to read, by the way.
No, no,
But
it's
if you're
not.
very
It's
slow,
really not.
okay, if you're a slow reader, you know what I
If you're
mean? It's
reading it in Japanese and your Japanese isn't great, it may take you 9
yeah.
hours. Yeah.
It might take you 9 hours. You could say let's say half a day. Let's just say half a day because it could
Yeah.
be my half a day is 2 hours in the morning, right? My half a day is 6 hours, right? Like half a day to read. My dad is a very slow reader actually, so I do try to err on the side of my dad's reading. Which his
Yeah.
English is perfect. It's just he reads slow.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that because then he commits it to memory and then he remembers it forever and then I'm so confused.
Yeah.
I didn't realize this podcast was going to feature my dad so often.
Yeah, this is a
There we
podcast about
go.
dads. Welcome to the Dadcast.
Yeah, I was like, we're not even at Solid Snake yet. All right.
No, no, that's not a dad. That's a daddy. That's a different
I
thing. Solid Snake is a daddy.
okay, guys, I promise. I'm coming back. All right. My point being, sorry, with Kiki as like a film is that like one, I think that the universality of that tension of connection kind of reinforced, I think, Miyazaki's kind of own thinking, right, towards like his children and future children, and
Oh,
or
do
right.
we want to get into that? Because
We don't want to get into that.
that's a
That is a
fraught
whole
topic.
thing. No, 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 no. That's a fraught thing. But also, right, like the people, the actual animations in this team, right? Because it's not just
Yeah,
Miyazaki, right? Like,
yeah,
yes, his
exactly.
name is on it. It's not just him. It's kind of everyone, right? His writers, his animators.
Well,
They're
no,
like,
he
hey,
wrote the
let's.
screenplay. He wrote the
He.
screenplay.
Oh, he did write the whole screenplay for
Yeah,
this.
that's
Yes. Hence why I was
early
like, this is a
Miyazaki is
fraught
infamous
topic.
for
You're
this,
right.
like writing
Yeah.
everything, oftentimes like getting keyframes from his animators and like redrawing them himself. He is obsessive when it comes to like hands-on intervention in the production process.
Yeah, it was okay. So no, that was really good because I had it in my notes with a question mark for like writing question mark because I just didn't have time to look it up.
Yeah, he wrote
But
it.
like you fact checked me. I love that because it very much was trying to create something that I think everyone could relate to.
Yeah,
And also, the reason why I'm bringing this up about relatability is that in a novel, you have the ability to go into the inner monologue of our characters, right? And how
yeah.
they are coming of age and their actual,
Oh, and how they understand it
yeah,
too.
how
Yeah,
they understand it, the actual like it can make things more explicit. But in film, unless like you're doing that type of narrator style, like the monologue of a person,
or write
you
in
can't.
dialogue where like the character explains that to someone else.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly, and
yeah,
it becomes exposition, which then nobody really likes in a film
yeah,
anyway. I do think Miyazaki had to take some of that out and then showcase it through that lens of Kiki, like, leaving and being happy about it, and then immediately dashing her hopes cinematically, one with the explicit dialogue of
yeah.
as she's on the broom, she leaves her house, it's a clear night, she meets a witch that's returning, and then immediately the witch is like, "Oh, I have a skill. What's your skill? Oh, you don't have any skills? That's cute for you. That's my hometown." And then Kiki's like, "Your home's so big." She's like, "Not really. Anyway, good luck." And then just fricking leaves.
Yeah,
Okay. And then right after that, Kiki's like, "What is my skill?" And then suddenly lightning crashes, super thunderstrike, right? It's like, no, you have
yeah.
no skill. You don't
Oh
even know
yeah,
how
it's
to
pretty
fly,
explicit. It's like, oh well,
right?
is this storm her inner turmoil? Oh, I wonder.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. So, like,
Yeah,
while you're not able to be explicit, say in dialogue or in Kiki's monologue, it was like 100%, right? Super explicit cinematically. What is my
yeah,
skill? Bang, nothing. You're not even flying your own broom because your mom didn't trust you to fly it. Like, I think that's when I think about filmic, right? Coming of age. That's like that moment where whatever happened in the book, which was probably like, 2 or 3 chapters, right? Of internal dialogue. Like, he had to stuff into the and now you're going to take a train to a faraway land. You're going to have one outfit that you wear, and everybody in a city usually has multiple. I mean, multiple people usually have multiple outfits, but let's
no,
wash
everybody
that
wears
under
the
the
same
rug.
outfit. Everybody wears the
Everyone wears
same
the
outfit.
same outfit in a
Yeah,
movie. It's a movie. There's only one costume. Okay, costume budget
yeah,
tight, and everyone she meets initially, right, is just implicitly like a big city. Like, why are you telling us who you are on the side of the street? The cop coming after her because she's flying her broom in a bus zone, you know? Like, hey,
yeah,
now go to the broom lane. There's no
yeah,
broom lane. But I mean, it's just constantly in her face. And then suddenly you can see her start to shut down, right? And I think
yeah,
it's that contrast that really helps, like, go from that naive, like, I'm really happy and excited to leave town to, right?
yeah,
Now I'm here in this big city. I really wanna be here, but who am I here?
yeah. And since we're talking about aesthetics, I think Lauren is spot on to say that like we have to think about this cinematically because it is a film. And so the thing is that initially what we get with Kiki's journey to the city is and in the film it's just like the city. The city never really gets a name. Um she oftentimes will see like human, I guess you could say, settlements and habitations from like a remove. She's high up on her broom looking down over the whole thing, or like she sees it far off in the distance, like when she first sees the city, sitting along like the shoreline of the ocean. And so there's this idea of sort of like looking at a city as a panoply, which sort of mimics her early understanding of what's going on, and then understanding a city from like inside of its guts, like on the street level, quite literally. Like the first time she finds herself on the street level of this city, she's immediately disabused of these romanticized notions that she has about what it must be like to live there. Like she's very kind of bright-eyed and maybe a little deluded when she's first like flying towards it, because she picks the city not based upon like her understanding of what the people are like or its politics or like many of the things that are very important to the way like a town runs. She picks it purely based on aesthetics. Like she makes an aesthetic judgment of the city and then has to learn about it like from inside of it in a
Oh
kind
yeah,
of like non-aesthetic, much more subjective manner. And
yeah.
that causes many crises.
So many crises. I love that because I mean, I largely chose San Francisco for aesthetics and was just
Then you got here like,
lucky.
whoa, cops just don't stop hassling me.
Okay, to
They're
be
always
fair, when I
telling
did move here, I got pulled over by the cop 3 times within like a 3-month span because
it's
my
like,
driver's license wasn't changed over.
yeah.
I made an illegal U-turn that is not illegal in Texas because, what is illegal in Texas? Sorry. It just wasn't illegal in Texas.
Are things illegal in Texas besides being trans?
Oh man, bless everyone there.
Sorry,
We
sorry,
are
sorry, sorry. That's a
solidarity. No,
bad
it's
that was a
okay.
bad joke. I'm
I'm
sorry.
here. Solidarity for you guys. Please get out. Like me. Okay. No, my car registration expired. I guess it wasn't in 3 months. My first year, my car registration expired in California, and in Texas, car registration's every 2 years. And just my brain did not. I mean, besides with the game dev crunch and all of that, like my brain just did not
Yeah.
realize I needed to re-register my car. Like
Yeah.
because I had been only registering every 2 years forever. And then, thankfully, I just want everyone to realize I didn't get a ticket like in any of these scenarios. Like, so they were actually very polite to me, thank you. But they were very much like, "Lady, what are you doing here?" Like, and I was like, "Look, I'm in the peninsula. I'm not even in SF, the city. Like,
Yeah.
I'm just, I'm just out here trying to live my life and get some groceries." Um, and they're like, "Ma'am, this is your ticket that you can get removed once you go to the courthouse, but like you got to go to the DMV tomorrow, and it says this on the ticket. So just maybe not, if not tomorrow. Say you get sick, okay, fine, Tuesday, because I got it on a Sunday." And I was like,
Yeah, yeah,
"Gosh
yeah.
darn it! Of course I get it on the Lord's Day." Anyway, point being, TLDR, that was my history here. Is that I loved San Francisco and I fell in love with it aesthetically. The first time I came, I actually came again for GDC and still fell in love with it aesthetically, despite the fact that Moscone is not in the best place. It's basically between Market and Soma. It's
Yeah.
technically all Soma, but point being, I was just like, I just want a city. And I say aesthetically because it reminds me the driving around San Francisco, like from the airport and in, or even like, my friend lived in Mountain View, so I actually had to go all the way down there and then back again. Is that it reminded me just so much of like densely populated European cities as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
And I think that this is really important because when you are coming of age, whether it is I am a 13-year-old girl flying my broom to the city,
Yeah.
right? SF is also called the city, so that's fun.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that in like postgraduate, so post my master's degree, coming back here into right the city, it very much was like I'm finally kind of going to this place, right, that I have envisioned in my head, right?
Yeah.
Or I've heard about on the radio. Like Kiki very much chooses because of her really small town. They're the only family with a radio, right? It's explicitly called out in the dialogue. Have you listened to your dad's radio? If she hadn't been listening to this piece of tech, she would not have left a month
Yeah.
early.
Yeah.
And then she gets to that city where it is much more technologically advanced. They haven't seen witches in forever in the movie. They have no idea what she does. She actually is woefully unprepared, has zero skills. Like, I was just like, yes, I see you, baby. I see you, Lauren, and I see that you were woefully unprepared for this tech and game development. I did have some skills, right? But when I first came to SF, I was like, it was a fishbowl effect. I was
Yeah.
like, there are buildings like 20 Laurens tall. Like, there are,
Is that a standard? Is that
this
a
is
ISO unit of measurement? The Lauren.
Yes, it is because I think about it whenever I measure things. I'm like, how many SMEs stacked? There's this game development mentality. Okay, how many players
Yeah.
high? All right, is this
Oh no,
building?
yeah, yeah, no, that is an important metric. You are correct. I'm
Okay,
sorry. I
so
take it back.
that's an important metric. All right, these buildings are like so many Laurens tall.
Yeah,
Like it's
yeah.
insane. Um, so I think Salesforce Tower had been built when I came here. I think it was like 2012, 2013.
Yeah.
I think that was the year it was built, right?
Yeah.
Maybe 1 year right before. It doesn't matter. Point being, like, that is how I think coming of age narrative happens is you get to a place, you have the
Yeah.
fishbowl, Kiki arrives in the city, and then immediately, right, it's like shattered. And then that entire day is her just running from the cops and
Yeah.
and not being like being too nervous to eat a sandwich, and also kind of running from potentially this guy on a bicycle that's hitting on her. Like it's just two terrible things
Oh,
in
yeah.
the
Yeah.
moment of this narrative.
Yeah.
And so I went on a little side tangent there with like
No,
Lauren's
it's fine.
history, but I think
Yeah.
it's really important to understand like how, for me at least, how relatable, right, the film cinematically made that at the beginning of the film.
Yeah. Well, and going back to the question of like how the film is different from the book, one important thing that Miyazaki adds slash changes is in the final, I would say like third of the film, Kiki goes into this like depressive spiral. That is, and the reason why this is related to what Lauren was saying is that like this episode is spurred by a reaction that she has to one of her delivery jobs. Like initially she's super excited because she goes to visit this old woman whose electric oven has broken down, and like she's like, oh wait, I can do this. Like you have this old like wood burning oven, like I used to do this all the time with my mother. And so then it's like she's kind of rebuilding a familial relationship with this old woman, and they bake the herring pumpkin pie together, which I don't know about that. Anyway, but it's this entire process, and it's like Kiki is sort of like and this is what I was saying earlier, where like she retains that connection to who she was. She's like using this thing from her past, bringing it forward into the present moment in the modern city, and like feeling useful and doing a lot of extra work that she frankly didn't need to do, precisely because of its like how fulfilling it was for her. So like she becomes emotionally invested in this herring pie. But then when she actually goes to deliver it, one, there's the storm that erupts as she's traveling there. But then also when she drops the herring pie off at this girl's birthday party, who's the granddaughter of the elderly woman, the young girl's like, oh god, these pies, she's always sending them, I hate these pies, why does she keep doing this, I don't want it. And then when the door closes, Kiki is just kind of left standing there, and it's actually a really brilliant scene cinematically, precisely because you don't really get any exposition. You just kind of see how dejected she is, and that is presented, again, talking aesthetically, presented filmically by like she gets back on her broom, and her broom just kind of drifts back to the bakery where she's staying. Like, and Kiki is not aware of anything that's happening around her. Like at one point, Gigi even points out like that Tombo is on the street below and that they should go with him to this party that he invited her to. But that doesn't happen. Kiki just kind of drifts and drifts and drifts and drifts. And then not only does she get sick because she was out in the rain and then didn't properly like, dry off and warm up afterwards, but also like that sickness is on top of a kind of depression that she feels, and then anger towards this girl, because when she runs into the girl again, she immediately, so she's at the beach having a fun time, she sees this girl again and she just storms off. Like she bears a grudge against this girl, and as a result of all of this like emotional turmoil that she feels, she quite literally loses her magic powers. And this is not a thing that happens in the book. She doesn't lose her powers. She doesn't lose her ability to talk to Gigi. But in the film, it was very important to show this young girl's crisis of confidence as a sort of like loss of the very thing that makes her unique and special as a person. And it is only through her interaction with, and I think this is very pointed, the artist, that she gets it back again, because it's the artist, the more mature woman, who is able to explain to her, it's like, yeah, sometimes this happens to you. Sometimes you lose confidence. Sometimes the thing that you love becomes a burden to you, and you have to rest and you have to take time off and you have to recover that part of yourself that can do it again, because it's about you. It's about nurturing who you are. And honestly, like, if there's anything that I've ever seen in a film that I found really poignant, because I actually have a lot of criticism of Miyazaki's films, it's this interaction between this young woman and this teenage girl who's like finally, supposed to now become an adult herself, and the way that they interact with each other and the way they tried to like understand the world, not just as a function of sort of like their capacity within it, like to do a good job, to be like good at delivering or baking or whatever, or like making paintings, but also as a function of crisis and personal loss and like loss of a sense of self. How do you deal with that? How do you move forward? And the fact that the film is willing to actually approach that and present it kind of in its just rawness, and the fact that that's a thing that Miyazaki added, like that's where you can't just look at the. So another detail to sort of buttress this point, the painting that the artist creates that Kiki sees when she comes to stay with her is very reminiscent of the style of like the folk art from Nausicaa, from Kaze no Tani no Nausicaa. And for Miyazaki, that is his like baby, especially in his early career. That was like the the creative act that he himself had fits and starts with. So I can't help but read this exchange between the artist and Kiki as, in a certain way, Miyazaki working out his own feelings about this creative work that meant a whole lot to him for like more than a decade, and how he himself was grappling with those feelings of insecurity. Like this meditation on sort of like creation and the nature of the self, like it's really, I don't want to say it's really fucking deep, man, but what it does is it's really honest. And that's what
Yeah.
I love about this film, is that this film is very, it's hack at times, but it's always honest about its characters in a way that is striking,
I think
even now.
that what's yeah. No, for me, I really love that you kind of went into kind of that depressive episode and also Kiki's lack of confidence and that crisis of kind of faith she has in that moment
Yeah.
is really stemming from that connection to herself that I don't think she really understood she had originally. And what do I mean by that? What I mean is that Kiki, I brought up the technology aspect with like she was fascinated with her dad's radio. She's
Yeah.
fascinated by the big city,
Yeah.
right? And she is fascinated by all of like the movement. And then she's like, oh, I'll be a delivery girl. Like it kind of just happens to her.
Yeah.
But in the film, in the grocery shopping scene at the very beginning, I'm just going to kind of keep going back to the beginning, but I will get back to the scene on the beach as well. Is that she is like, this skillet is so expensive because to her, a skillet's just an everyday object. She doesn't think about how it's more expensive to live in the city. I mean, she doesn't know she's 13.
Yeah.
But in the confines of this world, right, she's like, in order to buy a skillet that I would need to really stand out on my own with, right? I'm not going to ask for help. I'm not going to ask to buy borrowing pans. No, I'm an independent 13-year-old. I'm going to buy a skillet, but now all I can do is afford to eat pancakes. And then you see, right, the red shoes in the window, and she's like, well, those are pretty. Like she starts to go, oh, there's something else out here, right, that I want. And so she goes, I'll work hard because if I work hard, I'll get money. If I get money, I can have the shoes. She brings up clothes a little bit more than I would like, but like, let's just keep working on this.
Yeah.
Is that like as a continuous thread? Is that then when she sees the shoes again at the end of the film, when she accepts herself, it's really not about the shoes. It was that at the beginning, she's trying, I think, to change herself into like, I am going to be the city person. I'm going to waste all my money, not waste, but like spend it all on pancakes, spend it all on the necessities that I need. I'm going to continue to earn it, but like only by becoming and changing myself for society. Like, I don't think Kiki was actually accepting the parts of her. Now, the pumpkin pie scene, and when they make it, and she's like, I'm used to this, is that
Yeah.
she finally has that old piece of tech she didn't realize that she enjoyed. And so
Yeah.
she pours herself into making the pie for the young girl because she goes, this is so hard. This is how I've had to do things my whole life. And now, finally, someone else will be able to appreciate it. And
Yeah.
so it isn't the rejection of like the pumpkin pie that is happening in that cinematic moment. She's dejected because suddenly she goes, wow, I am not accepted by the
Yeah.
society.
Yeah.
Even though like people might like her on the surface, right?
Yeah,
She's
aesthetically, they
going
like her
aesthetically.
aesthetically, yeah.
Yeah, aesthetically, they're like, oh, she's a witch. She's cool, right? She's like, but if I didn't have my magic, would they still think I am, right? Cool. And then it
Yeah.
turns out she loses the thing that she thinks is what makes her special. And that's what ends up forcing her to accept that she herself, with or without magic, right, is special. And that magic is just a part of her. And so I'm pointing this very clearly to the magic because that is how it feels when you're a creative.
Yeah.
People like me at my job because I do really good art. People like me at my job because I'm a really good writer. But when I can't write, when I can't do art, when I can't output my creativity, people are, well, when is that deadline gonna be done? Like, are you gonna hit your deadline again?
Yeah.
Oh, when are you gonna finish that art? Writers' every favorite question, like, when is the book finished? Like, what have you been doing? And you're just sitting there looking at the blank page, like, I swear to good night, I have a ton of ideas. And then you start going, oh, people only value me for the work that I do. People only value me for the creativity that I have. And then suddenly you're like, well, I can't do it anymore. I'm burned out. I'm depressed, right? I'm alone. But also,
Yeah.
it is a bit of that self isolation that I think Miyazaki is reflecting really well here in the cinema. And I
Yeah.
think this is a really good distinction because when we think of Kiki and we think of some of the arguments that have come from Kiki's delivery service, I have loved to see those kind of like burnout, depression, and creativity kind of moments in here. That ultimately, then when you see someone who didn't even realize that they rejected you so completely on the right, she
Yeah.
has to see the girl and is like, no, I'm rejecting you now. Like, I have
Yeah.
to walk away from you. And that girl has no idea, right, what she did because she's just like, I'm living my life. Like, this is my like reality.
Yeah.
And Kiki's like, you didn't just reject your grandmother. Like, you rejected me, you rejected my values. And
Oh
I
yeah.
think that is something that then Miyazaki brings in. And he goes, hey, she is never losing her connection, I think, to her home. But I
Yeah.
think that in that moment, cinematically, he condenses that coming of age narrative into a no, she loses her home in that moment because she loses her powers, she loses herself, she uses that crisis. And then it takes that acceptance of herself to then finally, right, regain her confidence. And at the end of the film, right, regain her ability to fly.
So, by way of kind of bringing things towards a conclusion, a very long conclusion, as we are wont to do on the show, I want to talk a little bit about sort of like Kiki as a quote unquote magical girl phenomena, explicitly in relation to
I
a,
know. I
a
just
show.
realized the time. Sorry.
Yeah,
And I
it's
was
fine.
like, oh, we have no time. It's okay. We'll get into this later as
A
well.
show we discussed on this very podcast earlier in the same season, Madoka, where like in that show it is very explicitly a critique of the very genre that it exists in. But the thing is that, and what's interesting is that, like, if you think about, sort of like the interior world of that show, like when a magical girl becomes like is overwhelmed by despair, what does she become? She becomes a witch. And a witch in that universe is obviously not necessarily a witch in like the Kiki sense. It's more like a kind of like force, a cosmic force who like has this really weird effect on like all of the people in the surrounding area. But this idea that sort of like there is this connection between this type of early adolescent girl, the roles that they're expected to take on, and what a kind of like depressive outlook towards the world will turn you into. And Kiki does actually have to face that crisis. Now, it's interesting that when I put this in the show notes, I was originally going to argue, like, okay, no, Kiki is a different kind of thing that kind of exists alongside sort of the long history of, like, the magical girl trope in Japanese manga and anime. But as we've been talking through this particular part of the film, I'm starting to realize that Madoka, especially, is tapping into something that is also there in Kiki, which is like, what is it that you become when you confront this like fundamental despair at like recognizing the nature of the world around you? And in Madoka, this is
Mhm.
presented as a very strict dichotomy. Like you either give in to the despair and you become a witch, or you munch on the grief seed and you go back to doing your magical girl stuff, which maybe has its own problems. We're going to set that aside for a second. Whereas in Kiki's case, like those two things are not mutually exclusive. Like you can sort of be in the depression, you can confront the realization of what the world is around you, and you can come through the other side of it. And
Yeah.
both of these texts, even though I would consider one to be very clearly in the magical girl tradition because it's literally in the title, and the other which is sort of alongside it, they're both trying, and you see this in a lot of shoujo anime as well, like not just magical girl stuff. I mean, you do see it in Sailor Moon, especially. You see a little bit of it in Cardcaptor Sakura. This idea that becoming this powerful individual, this new kind of individual, also then becomes for like the teenage girl a crisis of identity. They don't know who they are. They don't know who they're supposed to be. And obviously that's a common trope in anything dealing with like adolescence. But in this particular instance, that crisis is then sort of mapped on top of this sort of like expectation for what the like this superior individual is supposed to be for other people, and everyone in these series and in these films reacts very differently to that challenge.
Yeah, I think for me, when I was like, when I read the show note about witches slash like magical girls, like I very much saw like a clear dichotomy between, say, a magical girl kind of stereotype
Yeah,
and say like a witch stereotype. And I remember very clearly we talked about kind of the Halloweeny of the original book cover
yeah.
because no one would say Kiki is a Halloween witch. Like she is
Oh
totally
no, not
different
really. No,
aesthetically,
no.
right? If anything, like she's a witch, but it's like, oh, but she's cute. She's like a pretty girl. Like she's just more of a teenager that happens to fly on a broom with a black cat, right? Like it's the aesthetic of a witch or the concept even,
Yeah,
right? Versus you could say of the modern kind of medieval witch. And I think what's really important here for me is that I've been doing a lot of the archetype work in my own kind of like self work, like as a writer. And archetype basically is something that comes from kind of like an idea. You could also call it a trope, right? So like a
yeah,
protector, right? A guardian, a prince. A prince is an easy archetype, right? A
yeah,
princess, you
yeah,
automatically kind of get an idea. A witch also has, right, an idea of your head. And I think what's interesting is I never really saw Kiki as a magical girl. And I think it really kind of comes down to, in my own communication, seeing Kiki as a witch because she is a young girl with power, but she very pointedly is an outsider. And in just
yeah,
in literary tradition, if we think of the other, right, women throughout history have kind of been seen as the other. They've also been seen as having this type of prophetic power, right?
yeah,
Maybe no one listens to it, so it's Cassandra. Everyone listens to it, it's the Oracle of Delphi, right?
yeah,
Welcome to the West, where everything is Greek and or Roman. And I think that like those outsiders, right, are outside normative society and are
yeah,
not able to participate in. And the witch's journey, especially for a young witch, is about trying to get into that society, right? Breaking in as an outsider. Just say, look at the outsider trope as well. It's like, I'm
yeah,
the outsider. I need to break in. But the only way to break in is to change the way society perceives you as the outsider, whether you are accepted and you integrated into a society, or quite frankly, like Nicholas has pointed out, you confront that
yeah.
society. There are crises.
Yeah, because I think
Uh,
what the film tries to say, especially through the conversation with the artist, is that like you're not going to be you're not going to be assimilated in the way that you think you're going to be. One of the things that you have to learn to be as a mature individual is to accept the fact that like you're going to be separate, and like
yeah.
your separateness is a fact of life. It's neither good nor bad, but it's a reality that you have to face.
And I think that that's really, really truthful coming from the artist here is that instead of Kiki trying to be an outsider that ends up becoming king, right? Like Aragorn,
Yeah,
right? She's not a mysterious stranger that's secretly a noble, right? She's just a girl, just a witch.
yeah,
And embracing that separateness, right? And that acceptance of knowing that as an artist, you are hyper observant of everyone's interactions around you,
yeah,
right? So, because you're drawing them,
yeah,
right? And like there, as a writer, right, you're hyper aware of the minutia conversational ticks that happen at a dining table across from you, at the restaurant where you overhear a
yeah,
conversation. And
yeah,
you didn't mean to overhear, but all she had to say was, why are you always like this? And suddenly 50 stories came to mind, right? Why is he always like this? Right?
yeah,
And it's that outsideness that I think because you have to recreate the real world to people, in a way that is also kind of fictive and all personal, like, and or things that might be real objects are actually like fake, everybody, we promise. All
yeah,
similarities are totally unintentional. That I think this is where Kiki is not a magical girl. And the
yeah,
reason being is that if you think of Sailor Moon, right? Sailor Moon is not an outsider. Like, she might be
No,
poisonous,
no,
or, like, you know, for
not at
all
all.
intents and
No.
purposes, you could say Sailor Moon's like, yeah, but like nobody really likes me at school. I'm like, yeah, but you're still at school. You still have friends. You still had a real normal life, right?
Yeah.
Even though you were like, I'm the rebel. Sure, Sailor Moon. Sure, Usagi. You say you're the rebel all you want. But ultimately, right, she is like the secret person that's actually the princess. She collects her friends. It's about, I am not only, right, like fighting for like myself, like in the name of the moon, right? She's fighting
Yeah,
for
yeah.
the moon and the earth.
Fucking moon, baby.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right? I punish you
Yeah, yeah.
because I am an arbiter of justice for society. And I
Yeah.
think that's my key distinction, is that a
Yeah.
socialite archetype, right? The insider, a socialite plus, say, young magical girl has power, is a magical girl, right?
Yeah.
They're fighting for society, or they've been forced out of society potentially, right? Madoka is
Yeah.
great as a magical reference because I still think she's a magical girl and not a witch, minus the whole that is literally explicitly stated in the text of
Yeah, those are two
Madoka.
different things in the text.
But and I think it's very true, right? That magical girls become witches when they are forced out of society and they no longer, right, eat the grief seed to buy into
Yeah,
the
they can't reconcile
societal
it anymore.
norm,
Yeah, exactly.
right? So it's all about living. Madoka does a fantastic job of taking, right, the witch and the magical girl and forcing them together and seeing what's going to happen. But in
Yeah.
Sailor Moon, it's like, no, I'm a magic girl. I was kind of forced out of society and I'm crisis because I just want to be that cheerleader in high school,
Yeah.
right? I just want to be a part of society. Why won't you let me? I have now been branded special. I don't need to be special. I want to fit in the group. Versus Kiki didn't have that choice ish, right? She was always on the outside.
Yeah.
And I think that outsider mentality is really, really strong with Kiki's, not just whether you look at it as a magical girl or even as like a witch, right? I don't even think what I'm trying to get at here is it's not just a girl metaphor. I think if you're a young boy, right, coming of age, and you watch Kiki's Delivery Service, or you're agender, right, or gender fluid, it doesn't matter. That's kind of my point here. So magical girl, magical boy, let's taking gender out of it.
Yeah.
That universality of whether or not you feel like I was special in society or I was normal, and suddenly I discovered something about myself that now puts me on the fringes and no one knows how to deal with me. Well, I didn't have a choice. I want to be accepted. That notion of acceptance. Same with, oh, I was on the outside. I was always the new kid growing up. So maybe that's why I'm reading into this. But like, I was always the new kid. Every 2 to 4 years, I was the new kid.
Yeah.
Nobody knew who I was. Where did I come from? I had to do the introduction. I like rehearsed what's my favorite hobby? What do I like to do in my free time? Who are my parents? Like, it was just a rote. Here's my 150 character intro to all of the kids, whether I was
Yeah.
6, 7, 13, right?
Yeah.
Like, just repeated, repeated, repeated,
Yeah.
right? And I think that anyone, right, can kind of see, like, do you feel like the witch or the magical girl? But I also think that in every circumstance of life, you are both. So that's why
Yeah.
I love Kiki's, is that it really kind of highlights a universal coming of age story from multiple different angles. And the fact that it was probably all of Miyazaki's own life as well, coming from a small town to the city. And
Yeah.
then also, he is the dad wanting to just be like, you can always come home, son.
And
Maybe.
then his son being like, "Actually, you're a shitty dad, and I don't want to do that."
Yeah.
But
Right?
then
Like,
but
that's
then
what
ends up working for Ghibli anyway in a very fraught relationship with his father.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
everything is nuanced, everything is
Yeah.
layered. And then also, I think the ultimate reflection, like Nicholas was talking about with Ghibli's getting his fingers in all the pies, is that he was like, I'm an artist. I have to be all over my work, right? The artist is also
Yeah.
me telling myself that maybe you just need to accept that you can't do everything all the time. But actually, no, I will do everything
Yeah, I
all
was
the
gonna say he never learned that lesson. Basically, the only thing that stopped him from doing it was that he got too old to do it anymore. That's it. That's what happened. He got
And
too old.
that's what's gonna happen to me, everybody. But with that, Nicholas, please wrap us out here because I definitely did my magical girl thing. I will love to
Yeah.
talk about it more in the Patreon as well. We can dig in
Yeah.
even more. So please go to those episodes where we'll talk about magical girls, shoujo manga. We'll talk about witches and outsiders, but we'll actually talk even deeper into other topics.
Yeah, so I'll preview that a little bit. So you can head over to patreon.com/footydashi where you will have access not only to the episode that we're about to describe, but also our entire back catalog of subscriber episodes, which is huge at this point, including 3 Furidashi Classroom series that are all really super awesome that I did, and I'm great. Pat myself in the back. But the thing that we're going to be talking about this month is, I guess you could say, the not we spend a lot of this. We generally try to keep the free episodes more on sort of like the positive critique side. The Patreon episode is definitely going to be more of the negative critique side, and also talking a little bit more about Miyazaki's oeuvre, like in the broader sense, not just Kiki, and the way in which sort of like his aesthetic outlook tries to divorce itself from a particular, let's say, nefarious ideology. And I think we're going to have a productive discussion about whether or not that's actually possible. So if you want to listen to that discussion, along with more stuff about magical girls, yay, head on over to patreon.com. I am on Blue Sky at Academicality. I am also on Instagram. If you want to see my cool pencil drawings, you can go to Instagram. I am cynical.dragon on Instagram. Lauren is Espresso Cat on on Blue Sky. Her Instagram is private, so you don't get to know that. Sorry.
It's okay if I make a public Instagram. I'll share it with you all. Maybe I'll start a blog instead, because after reading some of Kojima's works, I've been like, oh, I should just put my stuff there.
But
so yeah.
Now that we're over an hour, I want to once again thank you all for listening to season 5 on aesthetics. It has been a joy. It has been a pleasure, and we hope you all join us again next year when we talk about Metal Gear.